language. All right, can I have everyone's attention, please? Take a seat and we'll get started. Welcome everybody to this creation talk. It's always amazing when we can get to hear the experts, the geologists, the engineers, the people that truly know and are able to help us with how to explain creation to people that we meet, because it's the biggest thing that we encounter as ministers is this belief between creation and evolution, and it's getting a larger and larger gap. More and more people are believing in evolution. So when we tell people that we believe in creation, they go, what? You actually believe in creation? That's how wide this gap is developing. And we need the experts to teach us the science behind creation so that we can have the facts to give to people to prove that yes, creation can be, science can back up creation. It doesn't disprove it, it actually goes the other way. Because God wouldn't leave us without those facts to tell people. I'm going to invite Taz to say hello now. But before I do, I want to just make a special appeal. I want to, Taz has come up from Brisbane and he's brought all these books which are available for sale after the program. So by all means, head over there after the program and have a look what is for sale. But it costs the Creation magazine, what's the
Creation Ministries International.
Creation Ministries International money to send Taz up here and to speak to us tonight. So we're going to take up a collection to meet some of his costs. It's all on a voluntary basis. So if I can ask the two deacons that have been appointed to do this collection, I just ask that, you give generously. It's not compulsory though. Thank you for your generosity. I'm just going to call Pastor Fredo up now to pray, and then we will, start listening to the professionals.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for your wonderful creation that you have given us. And as we come together, we pray, dear Lord, that you will speak through us and give us understanding and ways to also to be a blessing to others and to uplift your name as our Creator. So, dear Lord, we invite you among us. Let the Holy Spirit permeate not only among us, but also in our hearts, especially be with us as He talk to us, as He uplift your name high. So thank you, Father, and we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's good to see you. And I'm glad to be here. And we're talking about creation. And what is the topic? Rocks, fossils, and the age of the earth. So I don't know where everybody is on this particular issue. So everyone can hear me all right, can they? Yes. That's good. That's good. And there's a theme verse that I've got where Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, and he said to Nicodemus, Nicodemus couldn't understand what he was saying. And Jesus said to Nicodemus, if I've spoken to you of earthly things and you don't understand, how are you going to understand if I speak to you about heavenly things? And so that's what we're talking about today, is rocks, that's an earthly thing, fossils, and the age of the earth. Okay, what's the age of the earth? So that's going to be interesting to deal with that. So that's what's the name of that particular rock? Can anybody tell me what the name of that is? Yes? Uluru, that's right. It used to be called Ayers Rock. It's actually got two names. Uluru, that's its indigenous name. And there it is, Uluru. And if you go there, hopefully this is going to work. It will. Uluru, it's in the middle of Australia. Uluru is there. And it's supposedly, if you go there, they'll tell you that it's old. Has anybody been there? You have. Has anybody climbed to the top? A few people have. I climbed to the top. That was quite a... Well, that's a long time ago, isn't it? How does that fit in with Adam and Eve? Have you ever thought about that? Doesn't fit in with that. And I should put a big X across the 500. It's not 500 million years old, but that's what they'll say. You'll see the Three Sisters. The Three Sisters is not a music band. Crops. Can you see them there? And if you have a look at that, they'll say that they're 300 million years old. You've heard of that? And you ever wondered how this fits in with the Bible? Were the Three Sisters there at the time of Adam and Eve? It's a bit puzzling, is it? Or if you go across to West Australia, there's a place called Point Perrin, and there's a sign there, and you look at it, the sign, and it talks about Western Australia's 4,200 million year history. Wow, I can't even imagine that. 4,200 million years. Have you ever wondered how that all fits in together? Well, I'm just going to touch on that tonight. We're going to talk about the rocks, the fossils, and the age of the earth. And it's got connected in with the gospel. It's connected in with the Word of God. And it's really, really important. It's important for families. It's important for kids. There's a guy called Robert who wrote to us a little while ago. And this is what he said. He said, a few months ago, he said, I started on my high school geology course. Woohoo! He loved geology. Started on his high school geology course. And he says, and my faith was weakened because of the evolutionary arguments presented in his high school geology course. And so that's interesting, isn't it? His faith was weakened by studying geology. And I just want to read something here out of Genesis chapter 1. And of course you're familiar with Genesis chapter 1. And we read here that it says about the creation of the world. In Genesis, that's where you go, isn't it? To the very beginning. You go to the very beginning, and there's God about the creation of the world. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God created it in the beginning. And he says, the earth was without form, and it was empty, it was void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So have you got the picture there that it's painting? The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And then God said, it was dark, remember? And let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. So that's the beginning of creation. We read that in there in Genesis chapter 1. There was evening and there was morning the first day. So it's interesting, isn't it, how God said, He said, it says that let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. So God created, it was dark, and God created the light, and so the light He called day. So does the word day mean a 24-hour day? No, it means the daylight part of the day, right? It's the darkness, and then there's light, and the light He called day. And then God called the light day. And then there was evening, and then there was morning. Evening it was dark, morning there was light. It was the first day. So there's two meanings for the word day there. The daylight part of the day, and then there's the first day, which is the darkness and the light together. Isn't that interesting? So that's how God created, it talks about how God started His creation. It tells us there in Genesis chapter 1. And so here's the days of creation, different things on different days. Isn't that amazing how God, so we've read about the first day, about how God created light, and then there's the second day, the third day, and then God, the third day, the earth was covered in water, and then God said, let the waters be gathered together into one place. And it was so, and the dry land appeared. And then God said, let the ground bring forth vegetation. And the trees which are pleasing to the eyes, and the trees that bear fruit, and that in the fruit the seeds. Isn't that cool? What came first, the fruit or the tree or the seeds? They all came together. It has to all be there together. So God created the trees, and it had the fruit on the trees, and it had the seed in the fruit. On day 3, day 4, the sun and the moon, and day 5, it was the animals that live in the oceans and those that fly in the air. And on day 6, it was all the animals that live on the land. And then something else, the first man and the first woman were created on day 6. And when God created the first man and the first woman, guess what? He said, it's finished. The job's done. And the creation was complete because the people, the first man and the first woman were created there. And so, but that contradicts 500 million years ago, 4,000 million years ago. How does that fit together? Did this really happen this way? And so that's one of the puzzles that comes up about the rocks, the fossils, and the age of the earth. And a lot of people say, well, maybe, and they look at sort of this story about creation, and they say, well, maybe there's a day age. Maybe each day was a long period of time. Has anybody ever heard that idea? A long period of time. Maybe each day was millions of years long. Well, that'd be some sort of a day. We'd still be waiting for our first day off if it was a million years long. And so that's one idea. It doesn't really work. Another one is maybe there's a gap. You heard of those ideas between Genesis 1 verse 1 and Genesis 1 verse 2. So there's all these different ways of doing it. But what we're going to do is we're going to learn tonight how to look at the world by the glasses that we've got on. Right? How you see the world depends on the sort of glasses you got. You might have sort of rose-coloured glasses, and everything looks good. Or you might have different sorts of glasses. And so we're going to look at the world two different ways. How the world looks at it today through the lens of evolution. That's what we see in the newspapers. That's what's part of the school curriculum. That's what we see around us all the time, David Attenborough. But then there's the lens of biblical creation. How does it look for that? So I told you about Robert, how he learned about evolution in his school classroom. And he said, my faith was weakened by the evolutionary arguments presented in it. That's pretty serious, isn't it? His faith was weakened. And we don't want to have our young people lose their faith because of what they learn, pick up on TV or reading books and that. But Robert says this. He says, a few months later, I received quite a number of your books for Christmas. I wonder where he got his books from. Wonder if he had an uncle that bought him some books. Came to a creation meeting and bought him a heap of books. I don't know. And I must say that these books, as well as this website, have greatly strengthened my faith. So that's what we're really talking about tonight, is to show how you can believe the Bible from the very beginning. When it says that God created in 6 days, it means 6 literal days. You know, it wasn't very hard for God to do that. And so one of the books that comes out is Creation Magazine. Does anybody here get Creation Magazine? A few people do. Well, you'll have opportunity to subscribe to it tonight. And then there's creation.com. If you want to find out about creation, where would you go? Creation.com. Is that hard? That's not that hard, is it? Creation.com. And so you find out about creation. If you want to find out about evolution, where would you go? No, not to evolution.com. You go to creation.com. You probably would like to have a look at evolution.com, but anyway. And, you know, we get emails from different people. I got an email from Gemma, and she teaches religious education at a couple of high schools in Brisbane. And she said, it's an honour to teach students about God's love. And she said, I signed up for InfoBites, which is this thing, InfoBites, and that comes out, and she finds that really helpful in her being able to teach about creation and what she's learned. And she said, I also attended events by CMI speakers, and so she finds this really, really helpful in being able to teach her religious education stuff about creation. Because what they get in schools, most schools, many schools, is about evolution. So on the table you'll find slips like this. They're over there somewhere. It's a bit of a mess because I haven't got my wife helping me. You know what it's like, folks, don't you? You really can't get organised when you haven't got a wife around. But anyway, that's what happens. So you fill that out and you'll be able to connect with the email alert system. So what I want to do tonight is talk about how to look at the world from a biblical perspective. You know, we talk about the glasses that you wear, right? And it gives you confidence in the Word of God, and it gives you boldness, and it makes the world come into place. So one of the things I want to talk about is science, touching on science, and the idea as what science is. Now, science, you know, like here's a picture about science. You could call it operational science. You could call it observational science. I studied as an engineer. I did a lot of science, you know, in the laboratories. We blew things up and, you know, and things wouldn't work. We'd have to go back and do it again. And we'd have to write it up. Does anybody here do things like that? Does anybody study physics, chemistry? You know, you have to do that sort of thing, and yet the results never come out to be what they should be, so you have to go back and do it again. Has that ever happened to anybody? You're an engineer, so you know all about that, hey? That's right. You can't do it on the real thing, but you can do it when you're doing the testing, right? So that's what we did. I studied science about spacecraft and about orbiting things and about telecommunications and satellites. That's all about science. But science is in the present. This is a key thing. Science is about what's observed. You have to observe it. You do experiments. You measure things. And science is about things which are repeatable. You can't get the results. You go back and do it again. You find out what you did wrong. So it's repeatable and it's done in the present. So that's what science is about, observational science. But when you're talking about evolution, about how things got here, about rocks and fossils, we're talking about things in the past, right? And so the past, you could call it historical science, but it's really not really observational science. See, this guy's got a fossil, and so he can observe the fossil, right? He observes it. It's in the present. That's why he can see it. But then he sort of wonders about how did that fossil get here. He's thinking about the past, and right in his mind he thinks, this fossil shows that fish grew legs, and they came out of the ocean, 300 million years ago, and they lived on the land. Well, I can see the fossil. I can't see the legs. Didn't see it come out of the ocean. I didn't see it living on the land. That's just a story. And so that's what I've got a few grandchildren, and I encourage them to say, look, ask yourself, what do they actually see? When you're in the high school class and they tell you something, don't stress about it. Just think, did they actually see this happening, or are they making it up? And if they're making up a story, don't stress, just think, I can make up a story too. I can make up a story because it's not based on observation. And so ask yourself, what do they actually see? And so the story is made up. It's not a scientific fact. It's not observed. And so different people, depending on what they think, can make up different stories. So we can look at things from a biblical perspective. So here's an example. Here's a guy. He's dug up a dinosaur fossil, a dinosaur bone. And look, it's got a label on it, which says how old it is. See that? No, it actually doesn't work that way. You just dig up the bone. The bone is the evidence, right? We're talking about evidence. The bone is the evidence, right? And the label is an interpretation. And the interpretation comes from a person's beliefs, right? It's what they believe. That depending on what they believe, depends on what they say about it. And so we mustn't be tricked by the beliefs that these people put up. So, for example, you go to the museum in Brisbane. You see, as you walk in, there's this amazing dinosaur to greet you. Right? It's a Matabarosaurus. You know why they called it a Matabarosaurus? Hey. They found it at Matabara. They found it at Matabara. They called it a Matabarosaurus. So there it is, and it says 100 million years ago. What do you notice about that dinosaur? Is there anything that stands out to you about that dinosaur? Anything? Some people ask, when I ask for this, there might be a young person say, he's got his thumb sticking up, right? Do you notice that? Anything else you notice about the dinosaur? Got a big jaw? So what did somebody say? He's walking. It looks like he's grinding his teeth, yeah? Yeah. I'll tell you what I noticed about it. It's dead. Did anybody else notice that? Did you notice it's dead? The dinosaur's dead. It's 100 million years ago, so death must have been around for 100 million years ago. And so what that is saying to us is that death, suffering, and disease has been around for hundreds of millions of years. Is that what it says? So that's what they're saying, isn't it? You go, that says 100 million years ago, and there's a dead dinosaur. So death's been around, and those dinosaurs, they've actually got cancers, and they've got cancer cells on them. So cancer's been around for 100 million years. And so isn't that incredible? And so what happens is, the Bible tells us that death hasn't been around for 100 million years. It says, as by one man, sin entered the world, and death by sin. So death passed upon all men, for all have sinned. So where did death come from? It came from sin. Who sinned? The dinosaur sinned? No, it was Adam's sin. You always got to blame the bloke, I don't know. But anyway, the Bible actually blames Adam. He said he was, he was supposed to be in control anyway, and he accepted. He took what his wife offered him. Anyway, we won't go there. So as by one man sin entered the world, and death by sin. So that's what the Bible says. And so the account there is that death came as a consequence of man's actions. And it wasn't millions of years ago, it was only thousands of years ago. And so the key thing that makes sense of all this is Noah's flood. Understanding Noah's flood. Understanding the fossils and where death came from. So we can find information. Where can you find information about Noah's flood? Anybody know where you can find information about Noah's flood? Hey? Genesis, in the Bible. That's exactly right. That's where you find the information about Noah's flood, in the Bible. I mean, we can also go and have a look at the world, and we find that when we look at the world, it matches what the Bible says about the world. And so there's a guy, a friend of ours, who's made a model of Noah's Ark. So here's the kids, they're doing a vacation Bible school, and they've got a model of Noah's Ark. The guy who lived next door made it, this model, and look at it. And you can work out from the Bible how long the ark was. It was 140 metres long. It could have been 150, but round about 140, 150 metres long. That's a long boat, right? And it had 3 decks, bottom deck, second deck, third deck, had a window along the top, right? So the Bible describes a lot of the details of Noah's Ark, what it was, and it had a capacity, you can work out the capacity, 15,000 tons. So it's not the biggest boat, but it still is a big boat, 15,000 tons, and it was incredibly stable. And so we're talking about rocks, fossils, and the age of the earth. And then the Bible says that God brought the animals to Noah, and the animals went on. And some people said, you know, there's guys, a lot of people don't like the Bible. A lot of people mock the Bible. And there's one very prominent guy who sort of mocked Noah's flood. He says, can you just imagine the blue whales flapping up the gangplank? So, well, hang on. You don't have to have the blue whales flapping up the gangplank. They can survive in the water okay, can't they? But it was every air-breathing, land-dwelling animal. And so here they are going on the ark. You've got the elephants going on the ark. You've got the giraffes going on the ark. We've got monkeys going on the ark. Yeah. And dinosaurs going on the ark. Now that's an interesting story, isn't it? That could be another conversation about dinosaurs going on Noah's Ark. And we read there in the Bible that God shut the door. How many people went on? 8. Noah and his wife, their 3 sons and their wives. 8 people altogether. And so everybody, they were the only people that survived the flood. So that means that you and I, we're all related, doesn't it? That's what it means? So don't come and ask me to borrow any money or anything, you know, but it's certainly nice to meet some old friends, or some friends, put it that way. Because they went on the ark, and the Bible says the fountains of the great deep broke open, the waters rose on the earth, and the ark was lifted up and up and up, and it kept going up until every high mountain under the entire heavens was covered. And so the waters covered the whole of the earth. And we read there that everything that had the breath of life in its nostrils perished. Birds, livestock, animals that creep on the surface of the earth, and all people. And so that's the story of Noah's Ark. And so when we look at the world around us today, we see these fossils. I showed you that fossil, didn't I? That in the museum, we talked about it and about what you noticed. It was dead. Did you notice it was dead? Yeah. And it said 100 million years ago. But that's not right. It was buried in Noah's flood. And Noah's flood was about 4,500 years ago. And it was a great big catastrophe that occurred. And so we need to look at the world through Bible glasses. So you can look at the world through evolution thinking, or you can look at the world through Bible thinking, the Bible way of looking at it. And if you look at it through the Bible glasses, then we can understand dinosaurs and understand that the fossils of dinosaurs that we find, they were buried in Noah's flood. And the Noah's flood is what makes sense of the fossils. And so here's an example up in Queensland. It's to the west of Townsville here. On the way to Mount Isa, there's a place called Richmond. Has anybody been out to Richmond? Just down there was a farmer found a skull in his paddock. And when they got these people from the museum, they excavated a plesiosaur, a swimming dinosaur. It's lying on its back, It's about 4 meters long. It's incredible. I don't know if you've ever wondered what a paleontologist looks like. You ever wondered? It's a big name, paleontologist. Well, there you go. You're looking at two of them. They're two paleontologists. That's what they look like. And they dug it out, and as they were excavating, it's actually fairly easy to dig out. The sediment was not gone really hard. They were able to extract it fairly easily. And it's on display in the museum in Brisbane. And they said, there must have been a big catastrophe here. Why would you think there would be a big catastrophe? Because it was so well preserved. I mean, if you knock a kangaroo over on the road, how long does a kangaroo stay there? Years and years waiting to be covered by sediment? No, it gets eaten by all the other animals and then scattered around, and after a while there's nothing left. So it had to be really well preserved, it had to be very quickly, and so that means a lot of sediment to cover such a big animal. And as a matter of fact, even the bones in its flippers were preserved. And so that's evidence of this incredible flood that occurred, Noah's flood, which occurred on the earth. And you see the evidence of it just to the west of Townsville. Hey, has anybody been to Richmond? You have? You've been to Richmond? Have you seen this on display and there's a dinosaur museum there?
Yes.
Yeah. It was buried in Noah's flood. Did you know that? They say it was 100 million years ago. But you know what? Nobody was there with a calendar writing it down. They just thought of that because they didn't really think it happened quickly. But it was buried quickly because it was preserved, and so it was during Noah's flood. So if you want to find out about it, you read Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8, and it talks about Noah's flood and the disaster that covered the earth, and why we find these animals buried all over Queensland. And so here's another example. So I can show you other pictures, but I won't. I'll just, here's an example of the Three Sisters. Have you heard of the Three Sisters?
Yeah, I have.
They're not actually people.
They're just rocks.
They're rocks. You know, some people might, you might think that your sister behaves like a rock. I don't know if you think that, I hope not. But these are three rocks. These are three rocks. They're sitting up there down near Sydney, the Three Sisters. And when you see the Three Sisters, you can see the evidence for Noah's flood. The water's covered, they rose and rose and rose until every high mountain in the entire heavens was covered. So the water's covered the whole of the earth. That's what the Bible says, isn't it? And when it covered the whole of the earth, the movement of the water would smooth the surface flat. And look at that. Look how flat the surface is. Have you ever wondered why there's so many flat places when you drive around out back? It's because of Noah's flood. And then you find as the waters were going down, what was Noah doing? He was sitting in the ark, wondering when he was going to be able to get off. And so he was looking out, and they looked out, and after 2 months, talk about being locked down. You know, he was locked down, and after 2 months, they looked out the windows, and the other mountains just started coming up above the water. And he was wanting to know if it was dry land yet, so he let out a raven, and it never came back. And he then let out a dove, and it came back. So he knew it wasn't dry because it had nowhere to rest. And then he let it out again, it came back, and it had a little olive leaf in its mouth. And so Noah knew that the water was going down, and eventually Noah was able to come off the ark and see that. And as the water was going down, there was a lot of water rushing through these big valleys, carved these big wide valleys. And the valley is much wider than the little creek that goes down it now, right? And so the what's going down it now is small river compared to the valley. Ever thought about that before? And do you know what geologists call that? They call it an overfit valley. The valley is too big for the river. And so they recognised that there was a lot more water in the past that carved that valley. Isn't that cool? And so there you go. Does anybody here collect rocks? Young boys and girls. Do you collect rocks? I'll show you a picture of one of my favourite rocks. Here it is. See the rock? Don't you think that's a cool rock? It's really good. And a friend of and where I work, this lady picked it up and I took a photo of it. There it is. Don't you think that's cool?
Yes.
It must be millions of years old, don't you reckon?
No.
Oh, good on you, boys and girls. Because you turn the rock over. Now you watch this. You turn the rock over, and guess what? It encases a little motor car. The person that sent me that rock, they found it down at the beach, and they saw the rock on the beach, and they kicked it over, and they were amazed. It's got a car inside it. So the rock can't be that old. It looks really, really old, doesn't it? You look at that, it looks old. But you look at that, and you know it can't be old. And so that's just an example of saying, you know, sometimes people say, oh, this rock's millions of years old. Well, it can't be that old because the flood was only 4,500 years ago. Isn't that cool? I'll show you a lady who, hey boys, do you like four-legged animals which have got long tails, stand up with the short legs and they've got scales on them and big teeth?
Yes. Yes.
What are they?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. Do you like dinosaurs?
Yes.
Well, there's a lady called Mary Schweitzer. It's very unusual for a lady to like dinosaurs, but she liked dinosaurs, and she worked in a place where they used to collect dinosaur fossils. And anyway, being a lady, she used to sort of be able to smell things when they were off. Does any other ladies sort of notice bad smells around the place? You do? So she noticed this bad smell when this bone came into the laboratory, and she had a look at it, and it looked like it was fresh on the inside. It was a dinosaur bone. And so she took a little sample of it and looked at it under the microscope, and she found that inside this bone there was fresh, I don't know about fresh, but there was blood cells. The dinosaur had blood cells inside of it. And she was amazed. She looked at it under the microscope and she said, it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. Just like a modern bone. She says, but I couldn't believe it. Well, she was looking at it, but she still couldn't believe her eyes. She said, I said to the lab technician, these bones, after all, are 65 million years old. That's what she said. How could blood cells survive that long? You see how her belief, she believed the earth was old, she didn't believe it was young, and because of that, she looked at it under the microscope and she couldn't believe her eyes. Because of her beliefs about the earth. She could have said, I looked at it under the microscope and I said, the earth is young after all. See how that works? Depending on, but she couldn't say the earth was young after all. She would lose a job. So she said, how could the bone survive that long? Now, I don't know if you know, are you very good at geography? Do you know anything about geography? Do you know what geography is, boys? You do? Okay. Geography involves mountains and it involves plains and all sorts of things. Do you know where this mountain is, this one here? Castle Hill. Wow. How do you know that, young man? Have you been up there? I suppose you have.
Yes, I have. I've been up there all the
You've been up there. I better not stir these kids up too much. Anyway, Castle Hill. You've been up to Castle Hill. Castle Hill is a granite. It's a granite mountain. It's made out of granite. And granite is a molten rock. It was once molten and liquid, and it's gone hard. Right? So it's a granite mountain there. And the idea is that deep in the earth, the rocks melt, and they heat up, and they come up like a lava lamp. Have you seen a lava lamp? This is a lava lamp, right? You ever seen a lava lamp? So you turn the light on, and the light melts the wax, and the wax comes up, blobs up like this, and it's really, really nice. Have you seen that? And so that's the idea of what geologists think, is that they sort of said that the granite of Castle Hill, and you've got the other one, what's it called? What's full of Mount Stewart. Yeah, that's Mount Stewart. Yeah, that's a granite mountain as well. And the idea is that it came up out of the earth like a big blob of molten rock. Could be 10, 20 kilometres across. That's the idea. Here it is here. Think of a lava lamp. That's what they say. That's what they used to say. Think of a lava lamp. Well, you've got the molten lava in your lamp. And the lava moves up. It might be 10 kilometres across, and it's moving up. That was very quick. But it wouldn't move across up that quick. Just creeps up, breaking the rocks, smashing them up, and coming up kilometres and kilometres and kilometres through the crust of the earth. That's the story as to how it happens. It takes millions of years for it to happen. And so the people say, and I'm just saying this is what they say, it's not what I say, but they say, so the earth can't be young like the Bible says. You can't believe the Bible because look at the granite. You know, it takes millions of years to form. Well, actually, that's what people used to think, but they don't think that anymore. There's a guy by the name of Clemens. He did quite a bit of research into granites, and he's written articles. 10 years ago it was written, saying that just about everything that you were taught about granites is wrong. Just about everything you're taught about wrong, has been turned on its head. And so the idea is this. Instead of slow and gradual, granite formation is catastrophic, really quick. And so movements in the Earth's crust, they crack the crust open, crack like that. And you hear of that, you have earthquakes and things, and we know about the crust. And so the crust cracks open, and the molten lava, the molten magma they call it, comes shooting up through that crack. And it comes up so fast, it can come up within a few hours, or in a few, and rapid ascent rates are negligible. So that's the way they think about granites now. It's been turned on its head. So that's granites. It forms quickly, and the idea is the large crystals in granites take millions of years to form. But they've discovered that these crystals can form quickly, and experimentally rates on granites are millimetres just within a few hours. And so it can form quickly. So this is 2 metres across. Granite should be, there's a lot of granite, these are called dikes, where the granites come up through these cracks in the ground, and sometimes they're a foot across, sometimes they're a metre across, sometimes they're 10 metres across. And you can see these things as you walk up the beach at Townsville. You can see these cracks there where the granites has come up. And so that's what a granite looks like there. And you can see the different crystals in it. There's pink crystals, and there's the white crystals, and there's dark crystals. And the idea was that these crystals took a long time to form, but now they're saying they form very quickly, just within hours. And so the idea is this, is that in Castle Hill, Townsville, that there was movements in the Earth's crust which produced this magma, melted the rock, and it came up through these cracks in the crust while the floodwaters were rising. The flood was a catastrophic event, and they pooled underneath the Earth, maybe a kilometre or more down under the Earth. Can you picture that? It formed a great big area, and you can see the granites all around Townsville here. And it formed there. And then what happened was, the floodwaters were rising, there was a catastrophe, and then the floodwaters peaked, and then they came off the Earth. As they flowed off the Earth, it eroded the surface down and exposed the granite. And so that's why you can see it around Townsville, is because those granite outcrops were exposed during the floodwaters as they were receded. So you look at this particular mountain, Castle Hill in Townsville, and it was formed. It was catastrophic in its suddenness. It was formed, and so you look at this stuff which was deep under the earth. It's been pushed up during Noah's flood as the floodwaters proceeded, and it's been eroded off. And now that's why you can walk over it. Is that cool? I hope that's cool. Is that complicated? I don't think it is. My wife can understand that. That's no problem, which is good. I'm insulting her, aren't I? So anyway, so I want to talk about the dates. You see, what I've shown you is that things can happen quickly. You know, the rocks can form quickly, the granite can form quickly, they can be eroded quickly, the fossils are formed quickly. So there's a lot of evidence which I've shown tonight that it forms rapidly. right? But then we've got the thing about, well, they say it's millions of years old. How do you get around that? They use carbon dating on it. That's what people say. Well, let's have a look at this. Here we got a guy swimming a race, 1,500 meters freestyle race. Right, that's it. People like swimming. Should be good to swim up here. And anyway, what happens is, he's swimming this race, and you're there, and you notice him swimming, and just as he's coming up to the finishing line, you look at your watch, right? And you look at your watch, and there it is. That's the time. That's the time when he touches the end of the race. He touches the end of the race. He touches at time there is 7 o'clock, 41 minutes and 53 seconds. You've got a very good watch. It's a quartz watch, highly accurate, incredibly accurate. The quartz crystal vibrates at a very precise speed, vibration. And so it's a great watch to be able to measure how long he took for the race. So can anybody tell me how long it took for this guy to swim the 1,500 meters race? You've got your watch, you've looked at the time. How long did he take? Hey? 7 minutes? You think he took 7 minutes? Somebody said? World record's higher than that by a long way. Well, I got some choice for you. How long did he take? 41 minutes and 53 seconds? 14 minutes and 31 seconds? 21 minutes and 53 seconds? How long did he take to swim the race? It's a very accurate watch you've got, so you should know how long it took. I mean, if you can't tell the time from your watch, which you pay a lot of money for, I mean, what use is the watch? What'd you say? Your pastor here, spoiling things. He said, what's the start time? We've got the end time. What's the start time? Well, he started before you saw the race begin. So the thing is, you can't tell how long he took, can you? If you just read the watch at the end, doesn't matter how accurate your watch is, you can't tell how long it's taken. And so that's all the dating methods are based on that, is that people make their measurements in the present and they do not know what was in it when it formed. You don't know what the watch was when it started. If you don't know that, you're just guessing. And so all dating methods are based on guesses. So the people who do the work, they try to make good guesses. They try to be consistent. And so I'll give you an example here. The answer is, how long did he take? You really can't know. The answer is you can't know. You can't know because you weren't there to see it at the beginning. Does that make sense? Does anybody want to ask a question about that? Is anybody not convinced about that? Because that's the key of every dating method. Now, here's a rock. This is a volcanic rock, and people analyze this with potassium argon dating, right? Now, potassium argon dating, based on the whole rock, they crushed it up and they sent it off to get analysed, and it came back with a date of 350,000 years. They have to make assumptions about what was in it at the beginning, but they just make standard assumptions. 350,000 years for their rock. What do you think of that? Well, they also just collected some little minerals out of another sample of the same rock, and they tested the minerals, and the amphibole mineral, it's a light-coloured mineral, it gave an age of 900,000 years. So what's the age of the rock? How old is the rock? And they collected another mineral, a dark mineral, added pyroxene, and come back with an age of 2,800,000 years. So what's the age of the rock? See, what age would you like? Depending on, and so basically you can't really know because you were not there when it formed. You didn't take the analysis when it formed. And so that particular rock, it was collected from Mount St. Helens, and it was actually collected when it was 10 years old. And there'd been an eruption, and it erupted 10 years before, and the rock was 10 years old, and then it gave those sorts of ages. Now, there's only one way to reliably know the age of something. Do you know what it is? It's the historical method. For example, we know how long Australia's been settled. How do we know that? Because there was the founding of Australia. It was the 26th of January, 1788. That's when there was Captain Cook, or who was it? Governor Phillip or something came in, and they settled Australia, 1788. So we know that. How do we know that? Because of eyewitnesses, people who saw it happen. And so the only sure way of knowing the age of something is by eyewitness, people who saw it, and by the written record. Somebody wrote it down and it's been preserved in writing. And so that's how you know your age. Probably you know your age. How do we know it? People saw it happen. Your mother was there at the time. My mother was there at the time. The doctor, they wrote it in a birth certificate, and that's how I know my age. And so that's how we know the age of the earth. And it's recorded in the Bible. We read there, this is a genealogy. Right? See this? Genealogy, see that? You recognize that guy there? That's Adam. Don't recognize him? That's Adam. And his son Enoch. And then goes all the way through father, son to Noah. Right? And the Bible records how old they were when their son was born. It's recorded there. And you can go from Noah all the way through to Abraham. And then we know about Abraham and what he did, where he lived, where he travelled. Go through to David, King David, and there's a couple of lines here through to Mary's line and another line going through Joseph's line to Christ. So we can work out how long it was between Jesus Christ and going all the way back to Adam. And it's a reliable way of doing it. Isn't that cool? That's based on the eyewitness report and the record that's in the Bible. And we know that that God created the world in about 4,500, how long ago? 4,500 years ago, something, I've just forgotten. I should have this off the top of my head. It was about 4,000 years BC, 4,500 BC, something of that order. And so here we've got the two ways of looking at the world, from evolution and the Bible. Evolution is based on people's speculation, people who were not there, coming up with ideas about what they think happened based on evidence, whereas the Bible is based on what people who were there, who saw it happen. So these are the take-home points. First one, evolution's a story, it's not a fact. So when you hear people talking about 300 million years ago, 600 million years ago, just realise, hey, they're just making up a story. I said to my granddaughter, I used to say to her things like, ask yourself, what did they actually see? What did they actually see? If they didn't see it happening, they're making up a story. And so if they make up a story, you can make up a story. So they're making up a story. So what did they actually see? And the other thing is, evolution destroys the gospel. Did I make that clear to you about how you've got death and suffering and disease before Adam and Eve sinned? I don't know if I made that really clear. And the Bible is the history book of the universe. That's the other thing here. And so we can sort out fact from storytelling. And we did that by saying, what did they actually see? What did they actually see? If they didn't see it, it's a story. And the Bible explains the evidence. There's a guy called Kenneth who wrote to us, and he said, I was raised in the church until my teens, before rejecting it and declaring myself an atheist agnostic. So he was raised in the church, and then he said, he threw it all in. He said, the creation evolution issue was the number one sticking point for me. How could I possibly believe the Bible if it was wrong from the very beginning? And fortunately, he came to understand that he could believe the Bible, and that's why he wrote to us. So creation.com is a great resource. Just remember that as to where you can get information, and you can connect to there's an email system that goes out. There's things over there which you can get these, and put your email address and get information on it. And the other thing is there's a magazine called Creation Magazine. Does anybody here get Creation Magazine? One person does. Two people, a couple of people do. It's a family magazine. And so it's great for kids that have it in the home. I've got grandkids that like reading this. And so the Creation Magazine is a magazine which deals with all these issues that the kids encounter on television, at school, depending on the school they go to, and in books that they read, and those sorts of things. Creation Magazine. So children are encouraged and that sort of thing. It's 4 issues a year, and I just encourage, if you don't get it, I encourage you can get it today. So hopefully we'll be able to sort that out for you. A guy called Jeremy wrote to us and he said, "Your writings played a really big part in me becoming a Christian." He said, "My older brother got me a subscription to Creation Magazine about 6 years ago. So it took a while for it to sink through. But the thing is, we get bombarded with stuff on TV and various places, and Creation Magazine is an answer to those things. If you're looking for a book, that's a good book, the Creation Answers book. Has anybody got that or seen that book? Maybe some. That deals with the 60 most asked questions. What about carbon dating? You know, and what about the gap theory? And there's a lot of things that deals with that. Was Noah's flood really global? So that's the Answers book. There's another book similar to that, Evolution's Achilles Heels. Do you know what an Achilles heel is? It's the weak point, isn't it? It's a weak point. Evolution's Achilles Heels. And so that's written by quite a number of PhD scientists showing that evolution doesn't work. Another book, How Noah's Flood Shaped Our Earth. It's amazing. I had people sort of say to me, I never saw any evidence for Noah's flood until I read some materials about what you'd expect to see from Noah's flood. And says, now I see the evidence everywhere. And so How Noah's Flood Shaped Our Earth. And here's a good one for boys and girls. And it's not just the boys and girls, but this is Exploring Geology with Mr. Hibb. Mr. Hibb is a grasshopper. And he talks about geology, and that's really, really cool. If you like rocks, that's a good one. And there's a guide to dinosaurs, which is... So information is power. So that's why I bring this stuff out with us too, so that you can get the resources so your family can be equipped. And we had a lady called Colleen wrote to us, and she said, "Thank you for your much-needed magazine. The information empowers Christians to share the gospel." And that's what it does. It strengthens people. And another guy wrote to us, he says, "I was converted when somebody got me a subscription to Creation Magazine." And he said, and after I was converted, I got subscriptions for my brothers. And he said, 4 of my 5 brothers have come to the Lord as a result of reading the magazine. So Creation Magazine, that's what it looks like, 4 issues a year. It's very easy to read. It's a family magazine. And it's a matter that you can subscribe tonight. We haven't got the forms to subscribe, but we can write down your name. You can write down your name and address, and we'll send it to you from tonight. And if you subscribe tonight, for 3-year subscription, you'll get a voucher, and if you, for a 1-year subscription, you'll get a free back issue. So, the earth is the Lord's, isn't it, boys and girls? The earth is the Lord's. That's how you subscribe. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world, and all who live in it. It's the Lord's, because He founded it. He made it, and it belongs to Him, and He's provided it for us to live on. And we live in a world which is very much sort of promotes an idea that nobody made it, but we need to be equipped and armed, and I just encourage you to do that. So thank you very much for that. I hope that's been a blessing to you, and I think we've got some things that we're going to give people an opportunity.
Okay, so there we go. So, it's question time now, but the first question I want to ask to you, who's got the roving mic? Here it is. Okay, answer the first one.
That's it. So did they get a prize for the answer to that question?
Okay, now we're in action. So, question, to raise your hand and I'll come around. But wait for the mic.
always find it funny how sometimes I'll say 253 million years ago. Where did they get the idea it was 3 million or 53 or why can't they just say 1,000 years or whatever? Sometimes Chinese look, how do they know that? They just
How do they know it?
guess that 53.
They've constructed this geological column. It's like, if you can imagine, a bookshelf with lots of shelves on it, and they're given various labels, 50 million years, 80 million years, so they've got labels on the shelves, and if they put a rock in here, they will then quote the date. So that's part of the reason why it sounds so convincing, is because they put such precise numbers on it. But they will change those dates every now and then. You know, they'll put out a new report, maybe next year or the year after, and the dates will change. And so it looks very precise at the time. When you look at it, 253 plus or minus 2.1 million. So they give you a thing on it, and it's very convincing. But they will change it, and you won't see what it was, what they said last year or the year before. You won't see that.
You know how you were saying that you will have the same dates where they have the cover day, and we're talking about historical organisms. And I guess if Mondays always had a mission of saying, pause eyewitness on the creation story, and it's got to be really hard to make sense of it because we know Moses wrote the book of Genesis, he wasn't an eyewitness.
Yeah. Moses wasn't there, but in the book of Genesis, there's various little places where it says, these are the generations of, right? It'll have a little section, and then it'll say, these are the generations of Adam. And it'll go through a little bit further, and it'll say, these are the generations of Noah. And then a bit further, these are the generations of Shem. And so, one interpretation is that little saying is like a signature on what is written before. So, and that Moses, who actually collated the information. So that's one interpretation, one theory about how it was written. Moses just didn't invent it. God didn't dictate it to him, but he collated documents which had been passed down. And that's one of the clues as to what happened. Of course, Adam was not there on days 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and most of day 6. He was only there at the end of day 6, right? So God was there, and God would have had to reveal it to Adam what happened. But all the other material in Genesis, it could have been eyewitnesses who saw it and recorded it, and down for, these are the generations of.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could let me know how old coal, fossil wood, and oil is.
I'm talking about coal, fossil wood, and oil. Well, coal and oil and fossil wood, they were formed during Noah's flood. So I didn't put pictures up. I mean, there's lots of things we could talk about, so I cut stuff down. But you find fossil wood, which is, it's become hard because it's got minerals in it, and so it's fossilized. So that would be during Noah's flood. The flood lasted, how long did it last? It lasted about a year, just over a year. So from when the fountains of the deep broke open, the waters went up for about 5 months, and then they went down, and it was about a whole year before they came off the ark. And so most of the rocks on the earth formed as the waters were going up, and when the waters were going down, that was as that eroded the surface. And so coal is just simply wood which has coalified, and you can produce coal if you get wood and you put it with a certain catalyst and put it in a container, like seal it up in a container with a bit of water and a bit of some sort of catalyst under pressure. Under moderate heat, 150 degrees, it'll turn to brown coal within days, within a week. And if you heat it more, the reaction will go further and it will become black coal. And so coal can form quite quickly, and there's no problem as it forming during the flood. They were not there. We say they were not there, they didn't see it happen. And so they might say coal, they might say that's 350 million years ago. They'll say that. But when you look at it, particularly say the brown coal in Victoria, you can see that there's logs in it, the logs are preserved, that you can actually take the wood and you can do machining on it and make little knickknacks out of it. So coal can form very quickly and it can turn to coal very quickly. Yes, exactly right. Did you all hear that? And 6 days. So we don't, exactly right, but when we look back at the rocks, we don't see the creation, we see the flood. So that's the thing. We don't see what God created. That was destroyed by the flood.
Where do they get the numbers from? Because when I went on the dinosaur tour from Hillingdon, Richmond and Winton, they said like 95 million and 85 million.
That's right. So they have a table. There's the people in different places who work out a table, and they've got a big chart which has got a list of all the rocks. You know, and they find these rocks and they find other rocks under those rocks, and they give them names, and they've got a list of all the rocks, and then they try to figure out, okay, how old do you think they are, and they basically assume certain things and they come up with a date. And so they've got a whole list of dates. So the rocks, where did you go to see the dinosaur things? Is that Winton?
Winton. We did a dinosaur travel. We went from Hillingdon to Winton to Richmond.
That's right. So Hewinen to Winton to Richmond. So those dinosaurs were buried in Noah's flood. They were buried as the waters were coming up. And so the dates that they give are basically based on certain assumptions that they make. They make certain guesses, and it all has to fit together. Actually, they just look it up on a table. You know, and on the table on the map it says these rocks are this old, and they just take that. So they were buried during Noah's flood. Those dinosaurs at Winton and wherever you went, they were buried at that time. That's cool, isn't it, eh? And you saw them. So there you go. You had a good day? I've had a good day. Does that make sense? I've only touched a little bit. So get yourself equipped and informed. If you want to subscribe to the magazine, you can do that over there. We'll have to fill out a piece of paper. Because they didn't send the charts, the stuff with me. I've got everything else. I've got it cashed in so I can take your money, but I can't. And so I'm just kidding. Anyway, there you go. Not a joke. Okay, is all good? You sort of think that's good? Any other questions? Beg your pardon? Did you see them going on the boat? Yeah. You want to make sure that's one of the things is you don't take the big ones on the boat because you wouldn't fit them on. You take I've asked in a school classroom, and a little girl says, I can take the eggs on. And well, you're laughing. What's the problem with that? Incubate the eggs, but there is a problem with taking the eggs on. You wouldn't know if they're boys or girls. Is that right? You wouldn't want to hatch 2 boy dinosaurs. So you'd have to take the young ones on. And the young ones are little dinosaurs, and they would go on the ark, and they come off and then produce family. And they've gone extinct since then. That's another story. Is that good? So I hope that gives you confidence. I hope it was okay. Boys and girls are still listening. You all right? Hello? Okay. Good on you. So thank you very much for that. Is there any other questions? There's a lot of good material over there, so take advantage of it, yeah? Hang on. Yeah, that's generally the thinking that the continents were in one place during the flood, or before the flood, or during the flood, and then the continents broke open. And particularly, it seems that it was in the middle of the flood, as the flood waters reached their peak, then the continents start to break apart, and in that breaking apart, basically they uplifted and the oceans went down. So the continental drift occurred about, when was it? It started, I don't know if you know about it, but it's in the Mesozoic, in the Jurassic, the Triassic, and that sort of period, the Cretaceous. So that's when the continental drift occurred. And it would have been, as the continents broke up, the continents lifted up, and the oceans sank down, and the waters ran off the earth into the oceans, and they carved the earth. You can see amazing things on the earth, the way they carved it. And around here, around Townsville, we're in Townsville, aren't we? Basically, a lot of the sediments which were above us were eroded away, and they exposed the volcanic rock, the granites, like on Castle Hill. They've been exposed, but there was a lot of stuff above that which has been eroded away as the floodwaters were receding out from Central Australia. But the sediments are still preserved inland, and that's where you find the dinosaurs, and around Winton and that sort of place. It's very exciting. It's very interesting to look at this, and when you study, if you understand. I got a lady in our church, and she's been to a lot of meetings like this and bought a lot of books, and so she really likes it. And so whenever they go around to places like Ayers Rock or Uluru and places like that, and they start talking about millions of years, she will ask a question which totally floors them. And so she has a great delight in sort of just a little bit of knowledge is all it takes to be able to turn this stuff on its head. Okay, is that all good?
Hang on,
Oh, young man, I like this. It's shy now. I'll look the other way. You can ask while I'm not looking at you. It's okay.
How many years dinosaurs live and how many books do you have?
How many years have the dinosaurs lived?
Yeah. And how many books do you have about that?
Oh, how many years did the dinosaurs live? Some dinosaurs lived quite a long time, and particularly the ones before the flood. So dinosaurs were created on day 6. God created all the land animals on day 6. Right? Did you hear that? He created all the land animals on day 6, and so the dinosaurs grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Some of the ones buried in the flood were huge. So there you go.
Sometimes you pull up on the computer and this old Rose's group. The first dinosaurs started 53,000 years ago. How did they get that figure? Because that's not prehistoric.
The first what happened 53,000?
53,000 years ago.
Oh, okay. So what's happened is that they look at the various rocks around. So you look at the rocks around on the seashore here. You got the sand, and then you got other rocks, and so they put dates on these, but they don't believe in Noah's flood, so they just keep going down. And then you said 63,000 years, so they would find a layer there, and that's just extrapolated to say that's how old it was, found in those layers. So it's based on assumptions, assuming Noah's flood never happened.
Engineers have been in this field for a while. Henry Morris, 60 years ago this year, victimised the Genesis part, which was really the beginning of modern creation. What would you say? Two major discoveries, some big discoveries, findings, realisations in that 60 years that support creation?
That support creationism. Well, the two significant ones. Well, that's a bit hard, but I think there's a lot of stuff which has come out in the sort of the creation model explains. One of the things particularly is to do with the landscapes. So the floodwaters peaked and then they flowed off the surface. So I showed you a couple of landscapes here with flat surface, wide valleys, and that sort of thing. And so the landscapes are very powerful evidence of Noah's flood. And Morris and Whitcomb, they talked about geology. I think like that, I just talked to you about today about these guys catastrophic in its suddenness. You know, these guys they were looking at the what do you call it, the magma and that sort of thing. And I talked about these guys instead of the magma being pushed up in a great big bowl like that, coming up through other cracks, and magma and granites being formed rapidly. So that's another example of how secular geologists have come to the conclusion that things happen quickly. So that supports the biblical account. There's a lot of things that do that. I can't really think of a lot offhand, but there are a lot that do support that.
Yeah, very good. And we've got this belief of the fallen angels and saints who have played the DNA of things on earth from around here as they had the knowledge of it. And there's all things that are beneath the sun today as well as that. Now, they have DNA and playing around with the dinosaurs were invented through them. Is that prophet teaching?
I've heard that explained, but I don't think you need to go that way. The idea is that the fallen angels created the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are just another animal, and there's quite a lot of evidence that people saw dinosaurs in history and that they've gone extinct fairly recently. So how you going? You all wide awake? You ready? Have you had a good night? A big smile here from this young man. He's obviously enjoyed it.
So I just want to say thank you to Dr. Taz. Amazing facts how quickly things can be formed, and it displaces this theory that they've had to take millions of years to form, where things can happen in hours.
Yeah. That's right. So the millions of years is basically God created supernaturally. If you don't have a supernatural God that creates things like that, you need millions of years. So that's the idea of millions of years. It's a naturalism, it assumes naturalism, so therefore you need millions of years.
So thank you for your presentation.
So be blessed, everybody. That's good. Good idea. I hope that's been good. I hope you've had a good time.
It's been
I have.
Now we've got books, so don't rest away. Go and have a look, browse, and you're welcome to purchase or give your name to Taz so that you can subscribe to the Creation magazine. There's also pizza at the back of the hall for all those that want something to eat as well. So let me just pray and then we can just do what we want from there. Dear God, just thank you for the presentation that we've heard. We thank you for everything that you have provided for us and the facts that you have shown us tonight. We truly believe that the Bible is the source of the creation story, and everything in the Bible we believe is the truth. Help us to live our lives like that. Help us to have the courage and the boldness always to speak up about you and your character and the truths that are in the Bible. And may we be the Bibles that people may never read. And maybe we be the sermons that people will never hear. But our characters will display you in your character. May they want to know you because of actions and the influence that we can have on these people. Bless Dr. Taz as he goes back home now to Brisbane. Bless him and give him safe travels and allow us to have safe travels as we travel home. We ask this in your blessed name, Jesus. Amen.